This brings us to our next guest, Ken Good, a bail attorney who is apparently very well respected in the field, I'm told, by folks who would know, and a board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. And I read a statement on the high failure to appear rate since the implementation of bail reform measures in the county. Failure to appear, of course, being these guys get out. They have blood all over them. They've just murdered Miss Medina. They got blood all over them. The cops arrest them and bring them down, and the judge says, "Oh, it'd be great for you to head on out, but pinky swear you'll be back in 90 days, right?" Yeah, and guess what? That guy doesn't show up in 90 days. Ken Good, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, sir.
Can you? I don't know if you're right into the phone or if you're on a speakerphone, but if you would lean in, because I want to make sure everybody hears what you have to say. First of all, talk a little bit about bail reform, as they've called it, what exactly it is and why it isn't working, and assume you're talking to people who have only a passing knowledge of the subject.
Okay, well, we have a county commissioner who colluded with an outside activist group and went to them and said, "Hey, why don't you come to Harris County and
you can say his name. It's Rodney Ellis.
I want to make changes to the way we do criminal justice and how we do our bail system, and I can't get it through the legislature, so I want to force it through, kind of weaponize a federal court through a settlement. And I'll get friends to file affidavits in the case and say, oh, the way we do bail is unconstitutional. Now, years later, the courts held that it's not unconstitutional, but in the meantime, it looks terrible. And then we've got the editorial board of the Houston Chronicle saying, "Oh, we have to settle. We spent $8 million in legal fees," and everybody agrees it's bad. And so what happens? New judges are elected. They all say we're going to settle. We're going to give the plaintiffs whatever they want. They do, and then we spend $100 million to implement this new system, and the new system is just a fiasco. Here's what we're doing. If you're arrested on a misdemeanor in Harris County, you just get a $100 PR bond, which is not $100. It didn't cost anything. It's free. And you get out, and then we've tied our hands of our judges in the settlement. They have to miss court 3 times before we can even do anything to them. That's what they agreed to. And then we tell everybody in the nation how great it's working. These people went to Ohio in the summer and said, it's working great in Harris County. We need to do the same thing in Ohio. And then it bleeds over into the felony cases, just like you mentioned. And so everybody says it's working, so they start doing it for felonies as well. And we're seeing the results across the board. Nobody's coming to court. The only way they're keeping the misdemeanor cases from the system from collapse is they're just dismissing everything. They dismissed 72% of the cases last year. And
hold on, Ken.
The year before
I got to stop you there. You're so used to hearing this that you're like the resident of Nagasaki that talks about we have to see this. We have to understand it. Slow down and go back. 72%. Say that again real slow.
Well, according to the Houston Police Officers Report, which was released in April of last year, and it's based upon data that is reported to the state by Harris County, in the misdemeanor courts, all of them, 72% of the cases that were disposed in 2021 were dismissed. Not convictions, not anything but just a dismissal. It was 71.99%. And then in 2020, it was 71.98%. So the only way they're keeping their system from collapsing is they're dismissing everything. Because you get arrested, you never see a judge, you get a free bond, you've got an 80% chance they never come to court, and so then you got a 72% chance your case is dismissed. And they're calling that bail reform. I call it giving up on crime.
So if this were to be fixed, you've got the federal – is this through the federal appeals? How can this be fixed?
Look, the courts have already given them a roadmap to fix it. They've refused. In January of this year, the Fifth Circuit reversed O'Donnell. the fundamental ruling in O'Donnell is the judges can be sued in federal court. In the Daves case, the Fifth Circuit reversed that ruling, and specifically Rosenthal. And it was by an en banc review. That means the whole Fifth Circuit, 15, 16, 17 judges, they all ruled that they reversed her decision, and they said essentially they want out of the bail review, so there's no jurisdiction anymore. And the Commissioner's Court was asked, hey, don't we want to go back to court and have this case dismissed? No. What are you talking about? No, we love this. It's working great. It's working so great. Lena Hidalgo refuses to debate her opponent because she can't defend it.
So you're telling me that if Cactus Jack Cagle wins and Tom Ramsey wins and Alex Mueller beats Lena Hidalgo, that's 3 out of 5. We've got a majority, and this thing is done.
Yes, and Mueller has already filed an amicus brief in the Russell case where they're trying to extend the misdemeanor stuff to the felony stuff. And she's already said, we need to dismiss Russell, we need to dismiss O'Donnell. So she's already on the record saying that's what we should do. And, Russell is already on track to be dismissed. They're having hearings over this from now till the end of the year over whether it should be. So it may be dismissed anyway because that's what the Fifth Circuit said should happen. But nobody's going back on O'Donnell. And you can see why. They spent $100 million. Are they going to admit it was all a waste of money? No.
I'm assuming you're aware. Are you willing to discuss the influence of Arnold Ventures on all of this?
Absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
Right there.
I saw a werewolf with a Chinese menu in his hand.
Ken Good is our guest. He is a bail attorney. He's on the Bondsmen board. This is what he does. Ken, I asked when the county so gleefully entered into the settlement, which has led to the problem we're seeing now, there was a photo taken with some Arnold Ventures folks and Rodney Ellis, and they're high-fiving. This was a great moment. So what we're seeing now is exactly what they wanted. This is not an accident. This isn't a flood or a storm or a drought. They intended this. It's important people understand that. Your understanding of how Arnold Ventures was involved in all this?
Well, they started by enticing the county into talking to them and allowing them to be involved in the process through a grant that they gave to the county years ago. And so that started the discussions. But I would say the best you can say is they have good intentions, but they just don't think these things through. And, they always say, well, any reform is going to cause a 40% failure to appear rate. And I'm like, you do realize a 40% failure to appear rate will kill your criminal justice system, because the system they replaced was less than 10% failure to appear rate with the private industry. And so we've now created a website, harriscountycourtwatch.com, where you can go and look. It's interactive. You can look for any day for the last 2 years for any misdemeanor court to see what their failure to appear rate. And we found the same thing the Houston Police Officers Union found, is that their failure to appear rate is 75, 85% on average. And we found days where 100% of the docket did not show up for court. And what are they doing? Nothing, because they've tied their hands. And so you can't get justice. And Arnold
how often are family members of victims showing up to then realize the person who did this is not showing up?
It's worse than that, because no one shows up. And so the prosecutors, how can they even ask victims to come when they know there's a 72, 80%, 85% chance that people are not going to show, and the court's not going to do anything to them? I mean, look, we've got judges who are saying, oh, we've cleared 108% of the cases pending, so we're doing great. Well, over the last 10 years, your dockets have increased 178%. And sheriffs, the rest are down 30,000, only because why file them? They're just going to be dismissed. Can you imagine our criminal justice system, our misdemeanor courts, if they had an additional 30,000 cases when they're dismissing 72% of any disposition? They'd just be dismissed again. It'd be 80%, 85%. You get to the point where you're like, isn't this just a backdoor California where we're just decriminalizing certain crimes? doesn't that kind of explain why crime's going up? We're kind of falling in the same trap. Arnold Ventures has lured us into this cycle where we're just repeating the mistakes in California.
Worth noting, I don't have the article in front of me, but Fox News did a profile on the George Soros-type billionaires around the country who are funding this bail reform. And it's not just George Soros. John Arnold, I think they said tens of millions of dollars that he has poured into New York. And this guy lives in Houston. He has poured into New York and their criminal, quote-unquote, criminal justice reform that has caused crime to go through the roof. In fact, crime is so bad there that the guy who was most recently elected mayor is a former police captain, and people thought, well, at least if nothing else, he'll do something about the crime. And that's saying something. For New York to elect a law enforcement officer, but that's really saying something. So this guy is interested in this quote-unquote criminal justice reform, and I honestly do believe, as Ken Good has just said, I think his intentions are good. I think this guy says, well, you got these black guys, and they're getting arrested, and they're going to jail and prison, and they don't have the money for a good lawyer, and it's not fair, and I sought to kill a mockingbird, and that poor guy, and that was wrong, and look at how many blacks have criminal records and go to prison, and something has to be done. And so the something that has to be done is, instead of a lot of people getting arrested and going to prison who did commit crimes, then none of them are getting arrested and going to prison who are committing crimes, and that makes for more crimes being committed.
Well, and the thing that they don't realize is they're setting rules which they say are to protect the poor, but what they end up doing is tying the hands of judges so they can't even address gang members, organized crime, or career criminals. So as long as you just stay on that one crime, like what New York did is, if you're arrested for this set of crimes, you get released on no bond.
Yep.
Harris County, you're released on a $100 free bond. And so it's the same result. But in New York, at least they acknowledge it. They've rolled back parts of it twice now, and they're talking about having a special session. But here in Harris County, they'll admit crime's going up, but they won't admit they have anything to do with it.
Wow. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. There's going to be a high-profile murder in Harris County. It's going to be a newscaster. It's going to be a celebrity. It's going to be somebody that people actually care about. You know, a professional baseball player or a football player or a basketball player or a politician. It's going to be somebody that people are going to pay attention to, because they're not paying attention to Lourdes Medina's mom, and they're not paying attention to Michael Essien. It's going to be somebody famous, and the person who does it is going to be out on a capital murder bond. They will have been arrested multiple times, and they'll be out on a bond, and they committed another bond, and we'll all say, what happened? How could this be allowed to happen? So I want to go back, Ken. This guy, Michael Essien, who was just murdered, and his 2-year-old toddler is in the back seat, and the guy murders him and steals his car and drives it off, realizes there's a toddler in the back seat, pulls over and runs away, and the toddler dies from suffocation or, I guess, heat exhaustion in the back seat before anyone discovers him. This guy's now been charged with murder. Here's his record: tampering with and fabricating evidence. He's been charged with criminal trespass. He's been charged with robbery and threats, driving with a suspended license, driving with a suspended license, evading arrest with a motor vehicle, driving with a suspended license, possession of marijuana, possession of controlled substance, assault with bodily injury, and theft. So this guy's got a long record. And by the way, he was out on a bond for criminal trespass. He's a tinderbox. He's waiting to explode. And here it is: a father killed and a child dead. And this just continues to happen. And I guess you see it more than anybody.
Well, I went to a forum where these judges were asked that question, and I got so mad because the answer just made me furious. Because what the judge said is, well, we can't keep them in jail. This is what the Constitution requires. We have to set a bond in the amount they can afford. And, when a judge says that, they're like, well, this is what the Constitution requires. So you go, oh, this must be right. The problem is, that's absolutely wrong. That was an argument made in the O'Donnell case by the plaintiffs, and it was rejected by the Fifth Circuit. And so the old judges were winning that case. They were winning. That's what upset, the commissioner and his allies and the editorial board of the paper. And that's why they're saying, well, we got to settle. We spent $8 million. Now we spend $100 million. Crime's going up, so we spend another $40 million, only to arrest more people and get them into a broken criminal justice system that they broke. And to have judges say, well, I can't keep them in jail because I have to set an amount they can afford, when the Fifth Circuit rejected that very argument. And he goes, are they intentionally lying, or do they really believe that? And I've come to the conclusion I think they're just misleading us now.
And good, thank you for being with us.
It's just politics.
If Jack Cagle holds his seat, he will join Tom Ramsey as a solid conservative on that bench, and Alex Mueller beats Lena Hidalgo. We can change all of this. This is why you must get involved. This is why we must win this election.
Michael Berry Show.